building with DavCat, because my understanding is progressing towards a point where I understand politics is additive, and to get things done in the world, whether it be piecemeal social engineering as advocated by Karl Popper, or whether it be more abrupt change like just winning an election and having a progressive left centrist president who delivers for people, who's about to propose the kind of infrastructure legislation that everybody wants, who's going to offer improvements to childcare, who's going to open up access to all these important things, who's purportedly going to cut child poverty by 40%, whose checks to Social Security recipients have admittedly been held up by 2 Trump appointees who hopefully are going to get fired in the near future. So today, hi Marsha, lovely to see you. I was going to say, sorry, the broadcast hasn't started earlier, but here I am now. And the goal is to start the broadcast exactly 1 hour earlier than this. Still a work in progress. But is today Periscope's last day? Yes, last day for Periscope. So going forwards, I won't have access to a Periscope audience anymore. If you want to follow me on a new platform, Haps is where I am, and you can subscribe at Haps, username DavCat. So if you want to be part of the coalition building team, I'm here to celebrate evidence I find on social media of people who are able to convince others, and to explore the science of successfully convincing other people of pro-social ideas. Ideas are what help change the world. Ideas are sometimes put forward by those we worship as heroes, but the work of disseminating those ideas is done by the foot soldiers of decent people. And in each era, we all strive for workable, good ideas that meet the challenges of the moment. So for our moment, the challenges are disinformation put out about climate change in order for petrochemical oligarchs to continue maximizing their ability to generate profit from burning fossil fuels at the expense of people's ability to breathe, at the expense of people who live near coastal regions to be able to continue living in their houses, and at the expense of everybody who's going to be victimized by the increasingly, well, not the, I shouldn't say that as if it's future, because there are already increasingly severe and frequent weather events that affect people now all over the world. So that pattern is going to continue. It's going to escalate, and the trajectory will likely be exponential. The exponential function is something. He's going out. Has he gone yet? He's going. Did he already go? No, not yet. I'm not saying goodbye, darling. I just started my broadcast. I thought you were going to finish watching the episode. Remember, Daddy advised you that. He said, play the game with Mummy first, and then watch the show when Mummy broadcasts. But you wanted to start watching the show, so you just finish it while Mummy broadcasts, and then we'll play Magnets. Baby girl, you did this the other day, and Mummy was not super happy. I just made you a sandwich, literally 5 minutes ago. I think you're being cheeky because you're jealous. Yeah, you can pour some more water if you like, or you can get strawberries out of the fridge. But I literally just made you a sandwich. Can't just. Or you can get a chair and Mummy will let you get one biscuit from the freezer. But you have to open the freezer, and the biscuits are in the door of the freezer. That was my secret hiding place. Oh, it's going to be noisy. I forgot I put on the washing machine.
Hold on, what do the biscuits look like?
They're the chocolate chip ones.
Where are they again?
In the door of the freezer. So you've got to put a chair up and open the freezer, and then look in the door. So the part that you open is going to swing out, and that's where the chocolate chip cookies are, in the door. But don't abuse your knowledge. Don't take more than one.
I don't know where that is.
You know where the freezer is, and the door is the part that you open. She is so cute. She's so cute and she's so competitive with broadcasting. She's like, oh, the minute you're broadcasting. So I might have to go from the broadcast, not because of her, because it's my parenting challenge to make sure she doesn't get attached to the idea of disrupting every time I broadcast, but because of the noise of the washing machine. How much is that bothering people at the moment? I don't know what the sound is going to be like. But what I'll do while I'm waiting for people to answer how bothersome it is to them that I mistakenly put on the washing machine at just the wrong time. It's because her bunny got dirty. You don't hear it? That's perfect. Not bothering Sylvia? Excellent. Good to know. Well, let's get started with all this really kind of almost healing revelations today, in that we're all hoping that there will be consequences for the insurrectionists who directly sought to overthrow government by sacking the capital and taking legislators hostage, as was the evident intention of the most coordinated group of insurrectionists, but also the seditionists who actively promoted disinformation in order to undermine the trust of the American public in the election process, and to provide justification for future measures to restrict access to voting, i.e. use all of the false claims of stolen elections and Trump losing because of Dominion or not smart tech, Symantec technology being abused to somehow find the votes that were just part of the blue shift that a lot of journalists at least made an effort to communicate to the public, that on election day there would be an initial red shift of in-person votes being counted, and that a lot of Republican state legislatures had voted to pause counting mail-in votes, even those that occurred before the election day, until after the in-person votes had counted. I mean, there was a lot of complicity with Trump's fake narrative to pretend that the election was stolen, because the initial bulk of votes were for Trump, or a majority of the in-person on the day votes were for Trump, and the subsequent mail-in votes, when counted, had a strong majority of votes for Biden that substantially overtook Trump's initial red shift majority. Look at all the people who participated in trying to emphasize that narrative, in trying to make reality comport with that claim that Trump was winning the election because he was initially scoring a majority of votes from in-person votes, which was part of his rationale, I have no doubt, for misleading the American public, misleading his supporters that COVID was not a problem, so that they didn't need to fear in-person voting, whilst simultaneously he disparaged mail-in votes so that mail-in votes would skew Biden and be counted later and be demeaned by Trump and his supporters as found votes, as opposed to the legitimate in-person votes. Sylvia is Stargal. Hi, Stargal. Phil can live with it. Thank you, Phil. Bob says hello from Bernard's. Lovely.
I have 2 cookies.
10 cookies? Oh, 2. As long as you balance it out and have some fruit too. What fruit do you think you could have? Or you could have a cucumber, which some people view as fruit.
Okay, but I can't chop the cucumber.
No, I'll chop the cucumber, but you have the 2 cookies first. 2 cookies. I'm excited for you that you managed to get them. Maybe we'll send Daddy a text message, because we didn't really say goodbye. Okay, so what I might do is share a cartoon to break up the monotony of me talking, unless the monotony of me talking is an attraction for the people who turn up. So I'm sharing the broadcast, but I don't want to completely get rid of me. So I'll pause on sharing it for a second. Here we go. We can split the screen and just see what I was most recently looking at, which was an article suggesting that inactivity is the 4th biggest killer in the world, because 1.5 billion people are so inactive that they are at risk. 5.3 million people die from inactive living every year. and 80% of British children move so little their long-term health is in jeopardy. So that's a concern, and I've definitely got out my weights in response to that. But what I wanted to highlight in relation to what I was speaking about with Matt Gaetz is some cartoons that I will click on as soon as they load, but they're taking a little while. Yeah, Phil says, "You talking is why we show up," which is awesome. I never would have imagined that I could achieve my dream of being valued for my random opinions. Okay, so that those cartoons aren't loading yet, so that's all right. We'll just, oh, they've loaded now. Okay, here we are. So the first one I will click on is a picture of the insurrection, represented as a Proud Boy with a MAGA hat on and a Confederate flag attacking a Capitol Hill police officer, which concords with what we know of the insurrection, that 140 police officers were wounded or injured in that. And then Matt Gaetz is represented as a cheerleader. The contrast is the Loud Boys and the supporting Proud Boys. So Matt Gaetz is holding a megaphone which says "Election Lies," and he's cheerleading the insurrection. And that is a very evocative portrayal of the complicity. Now, I did read some statistics that said that people who have been arrested post-insurrection, that a large number of them have been diagnosed with mental illness, be it schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Although the reporting on it wasn't entirely clear, it said the QAnon supporters who've been arrested following the insurrection. So are the QAnon supporters a subset of the insurrectionists, or were all the insurrectionists QAnon supporters? But in any case, the article was written to highlight that people who are attracted to QAnon are often likely to have a diagnosis of mental illness and be more susceptible to conspiracy thinking as a result. And the psychologist being interviewed for the article I read said anxiety and isolation are conditions that can increase people's susceptibility to conspiracy theories. So I imagine that could be one way to account for the uptake in conspiracy theories during COVID with the increased social isolation and lockdown. But I don't want to give people a pass for falling prey to QAnon. I will note from a Twitter thread I looked at where someone asked, "Do you know any Black people who are QAnon supporters?" And people were opening up and disclosing that they had friends or relatives who were simultaneously Black and QAnon proponents. So I would imagine that there was a subset of predilection to believing conspiracy theories from people who may feel oppressed. I haven't drilled down into what personality characteristics align with additional vulnerability to QAnon, but I'm going to guess that it's people who want to be special, people whose self-concept is as of being a very intelligent person who does their own research and is very independent, who doesn't just believe what mainstream media say. You got your cookies? You ate them? You want a high five? You want 3 cookies? Phoebe, you're just being cheeky because I'm broadcasting. Sure, 3 cookies is a good idea. Well, then, do you know what? You could get yourself a cucumber and just eat it without even chopping it up. Or you could bring it to me and I will chop it. I'm happy to chop a cucumber on a broadcast, but okay. Oh, Eddie Gillikin has just subscribed. Thank you, Eddie. I guess that's no. There's Mummy's weights, because I'm using my weights while I broadcast today because I'm having a subplot of talking about why being active is so important and being inactive.
About the
Yes day. I know, but it's not yes day yet. You just want to have a little bit of yes day. We haven't even picked a day for yes day. We just agreed to the concept.
Maybe tomorrow, yes day?
Tomorrow can't be yes day. It's your brother's something soon. Okay. Marsha thinks that QAnon is a subset of the insurrectionists. Bob is not inactive. because he has 7 and 4-year-old grandsons. And that's good. You mean you're lucky enough to have 7 and 4-year-old grandsons and be involved with them, because some people are alienated from their family members and so they can't hang out with their grandchildren. I mean, for some people, that's for good reasons. People have been disowned for being racist or antagonistic. I just remembered I've got a light, and I've had it for a long time and I hadn't used it. But once I shared an interview space with Kaylee, Canadian actress who interviewed me for her broadcast the other week. Her broadcast, she co-hosts with Justin, and it's called We Are Not Okay. And I really enjoyed talking to her. My audience seemed to enjoy that as well, and her audience. And it sold me very much on the virtues of being lit for a broadcast. Luke says, hiya. Hiya, Luke. Marsha says, I'm valued because I'm educated about this. Thank you, Marsha. And Sheldon notes that Gaetz has been described as a Holocaust skeptic and a Florida thug. Well, actually, he writes goers, but I think he means to write Gaetz, because Matt Gaetz did bring a Holocaust denier to the State of the Union speech. The Holocaust denier's first name was Chuck, so we'll just look it up and find out the name of the Holocaust denier. There's a lot of contrarian spirit that animates the Republican Party. And I think it highlights the fact that they are as a political party, they're pretty much a cover story for wealthy vested interests to subvert the course of governance in America. So I think you could safely say since Ronald Reagan, there has been a concerted effort to wind back all of the wins of the civil rights movement and the union, not just unions, but pro low income and middle class income demographic subsets. So the name of the Holocaust denier was Charles Johnson, also known as Chuck Johnson. Matt Gaetz denied that Charles Johnson was a Holocaust denier and denied that he was a white supremacist. And Matt Gaetz told the Daily Beast that Chuck Johnson had just showed up at his office on the day of the speech. So he just got invited because he happened to turn up. The Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, wrote a letter to Gaetz denouncing his choice to invite Johnson and urging the politician to cut ties with him, and wrote, "It is an insult to the memories of those killed in the Holocaust, to their families, and to the Jewish community, to bring to the State of the Union, as your guest, a Holocaust denier." And Johnson was also permanently banned from Twitter in 2015 for asking for help in taking out a Black Lives Matter activist. So he was using Twitter to try and, for making posts that suggested he was conscripting an assassin to assassinate a Black Lives Matter activist, which is illegal and also motivated by racism. Someone called Northeastern Ohio News says, hello. Why is your gnome wearing a little red hat? Is that because you're a little MAGA person? I don't know. Feel free to clarify. All right. Now we have other stories. I should say, when I note that a Holocaust denier was brought to the State of the Union speech by Matt Gaetz, that Republicans are also making Holocaust comparisons because of suggestions that a vaccine passport be used by businesses, so that when you get your vaccination, you have papers that you can show businesses to illustrate that it's safe for you to enter their premises without a mask, and that this would facilitate businesses in promoting that they were safe places to their customers. But of course, it sounds like it would really antagonize a lot of people on the right, because they're drawing a lot of parallels to the Stars of David that Jewish people were compelled to wear in order to facilitate persecuting Jewish people and rounding them up and taking them away to be murdered and to be used in slave labor operations, and to have their businesses taken from them, and to be just generally attacked and humiliated. So to my mind, it's very quantifiably different from the suggestion that people be transparent about whether or not they have a vaccine and have papers to that effect, so you don't have to rely on their word, because anti-vaxxers are likely to lie about whether or not they have a vaccine, because they would view the question as to whether or not you're vaccinated as being unfair in the first place, because they are animated by contrarianism against society and against public institutions. Be Awesome says, I will miss you very much, which is a weird thing to say because I'm not going anywhere, but maybe you mean you'll miss me from Periscope, in which case please avail yourself of the HAPS platform. If you'll miss me, you don't need to miss me. Daniel, aka Shocking Guy, has just subscribed. Thank you, Daniel. Marsha notes that there will be fraud even if there are vaccine cards or passports. True. Let's listen to the head of the CDC, Dr. Walensky. She is talking about some of the reasons for wanting to not have COVID outside of just wanting to stay alive. And she's going to discuss some of the side effects. So I haven't heard this yet, but something I wanted to listen to. Let's have a listen.
Is it possible that the pace of vaccinations already is such that the rising numbers of new cases that we're seeing will not be followed with the same level of surge in hospitalizations and then following that deaths? Is it possible that there are enough high-risk people in the country who are vaccinated that even terrible amounts of transmission are not going to have the same consequence in terms of people ending up in the ER and in intensive care?
That's a really good question, and one we're looking at. It could very well be, given that we have, been vaccinating our people over the age of 65. Those are the people that have accounted for 80% of the deaths so far, that we've done so well in vaccinating the, more senior members of our society that death might not be what we would expect with prior surges. It's also the case, though, that, if we don't see those number of deaths, the deaths that we're going to see is among younger people. Obviously, we don't want to see those either. And there are plenty of reasons to not want to have COVID outside of just the deaths alone. We know that about 10% of the population that gets sick with COVID has long haul syndrome, has symptoms beyond 3 weeks, cardiac challenges, depression and mental health challenges, pulmonary challenges, renal failure, clotting. So there's a lot that we don't understand about this disease, and we shouldn't want to have it circulating whether or not it leads to mortality.
Okay. So the long COVID condition she referenced was cardio problems, pulmonary problems, problems with your heart, with your lungs, renal problems, problems with your kidneys, people needing dialysis, people struggling with mental cognitive issues such as depression or mental fog, and a host of other problems that can follow infection with COVID. So these are all important for considering when you try and mitigate against deleterious Republican influence on public health, because they're precipitately asking for mask mandates to be lifted. They're precipitately ordering mask mandates to be lifted and for lockdowns to completely end, or partial lockdowns to end. And the thing is about people who oppose lockdowns is they could oppose lockdowns and promote masks, because widespread mask wearing is a great way to make it safe to relax some lockdown measures if you have people wearing masks. Marsha notes that her daughter is 21 and still has heart palpitations 2 months later. So palpitations, I'm presuming that means either irregular heartbeats or just heartbeats that feel very consciously detectable. So yeah, I'm really sorry for your daughter. That's really unfortunate. And I imagine the consequences of the overall burden on America of having people with these long-term effects of a pandemic that was allowed and encouraged to rage out of control by Trump and his administration. There's so much suffering. And as much as there are some people who are very aware of the Republican role in causing and perpetuating this suffering and extending it, there are so many people who also will now have a very profound motivation to deny reality, and whose appetite for more and more brazenly deceitful narratives will be increased. They will have more of an appetite for lies because of that painful motivation to deny the sad truth of what Trump inflicted on America by version of pandemicide or a soft genocide unleashed, particularly against the vulnerable amongst American populations. So Republicans were thinking perhaps that there were advantages to them politically from having elderly people on Social Security dying and reducing expenditure. They were thinking it would be beneficial to them to have less Black Americans and less Hispanic Americans alive or healthy, because white nationalism animates, I should say I need a term stronger than white nationalism. Rabid white nationalism animates a lot of Republican politicians. And there is not just indifference, there is not just neglect, there is active malice towards Black people in America. The anti-Black sentiment is so strong that it is actively malicious and violent. And that violence is perpetrated in opposition to mask wearing. So a lot of the people who refuse to wear masks, whether they're even aware of what motivates them or not, on some level, there is baked in disregard for the lives of essential workers who are disproportionately Black or Hispanic. So, yes, the division in America, and I don't bewail division, because division means at least some people are attached to the truth, while some people increase in the strength of their opposition to truth. I just like it when centrists become very strong as well and don't become quiet because they're intimidated by the vocalness of people on the extremes of either party. Now, I'm more open in condemning the extreme right, which is most of the right now. The extreme right has subsumed most of the entire Republican Party. But people on the left are also extremists, sometimes on the hard left, who propose guillotines and eating the rich and overthrowing society and overthrowing capitalism. That is a version of extremism that doesn't contribute to coalition building, that doesn't move society forward, that creates fear, and irrational fear of communism, and fear of the kind of people who do seek to solve societal problems by re-educating or murdering certain subsets of the population. Whilst I support taxes on the wealthy, I don't support murdering the wealthy and eating them. So, yes. Oh, we have a cute little troll who I will pay a little bit of attention to, who says very sweetly and very gentlemanly like, you have no facts, and they also say your opinions mean nothing. So I hope that by giving their opinions a little bit of attention, I'm feeding them in a way that may satisfy them, and then enough so that they can go away. So we'll try and give them that, and then we'll mute their comments so that they can no longer be seen. We'll be like, we gave you a little bit of breadcrumbs, now chuff off into the lake, little ducky. I have so much to talk about, and I also bring receipts. That is one exciting thing that I do. I try to capitalize on my curiosity, the fact that I'm not American, and so don't feel ashamed about my lack of knowledge. I'm perfectly prepared to pursue knowledge and bring the evidence to the table with me so that others can share in my knowledge as well. I think that's a big asset that I have. So, and of course, those receipts and that knowledge that I do bring to the table, they hurt. They actively cause psychological anguish to people whose worldviews are set up in such a way that reality causes them cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a pain that you experience when facts contradict what you believe. And that pain is something that people would do almost anything to avoid. And it's a very, very powerful driver of human behavior. So I always think it's good to talk about it and to highlight how to respond to it, or, just trial ways of responding
3 million vaccination shots delivered
to people who have that problem. Because to a degree, we all have the same problems. It's just some people get very overtaken by their problems and begin to behave in ways which are very thoroughly worthy of condemnation. But it's better if we can start gently condemning and denouncing people's bad ideas before they get to the point where they start to think of abusing their weapons cache, which they've been able to accumulate because of the misbegotten bad ideas of a Supreme Court conservative justice called Anthony Scalia, who in 2008 wrote the Heller decision that misinterpreted the Second Amendment and facilitated the acquisition and purchase of arms for personal use, even though the Second Amendment refers to America's need at that time in history of a volunteer army, and so referred to a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free nation, must be allowed to bear arms and not have that infringed upon, i.e. our freestanding volunteer army must be allowed to buy weapons to equip themselves in the event of a war. When we don't actually have enough money to pay for an army, we're just going to have this volunteer army. Please allow them to buy their own weapons. This is very important for us. Otherwise, we won't be a free nation anymore. We will be colonized by another more powerful nation. And instead, that Second Amendment has been swollen in importance and distorted in its significance until the Republican Party has become a party that promotes lawlessness, promotes... Hello? You're hungry? Okay, you can have some strawberries now. I know you had 3 cookies.
Oh, but I didn't have my phone.
Oh, you didn't have your third cookie yet? Well,
Because I didn't get...
Oh, you couldn't get a cucumber.
Yeah.
Why don't you try? Oh, the cucumber's in the bottom drawer.
And I'll get my third one.
All right. So where were we? We were talking about the Second Amendment, and I have receipts for that. I will bring it up on screen. I like to familiarize people with this particular article because it really highlights how Americans don't have to participate in a group consent of being bullied by America's most lawless, selfish, gun fetishizing, worst people, worst ideas. Oops, picked the wrong one to share. Okay, nope, that's not what I want to share. I want to share not Rachel Maddow right now. I want to share a Washington Post article by a professor of English and linguistics who detailed for Americans how Antonin Scalia was wrong about the meaning of bear arms. So this is an article published in 2018, and this is supported by linguists all across the board. Antonin Scalia was wrong about the meaning of bear arms. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And Scalia said that definitely didn't have a military meaning, and he found an example to support his opinion. Let's see if this can work. No, it doesn't like it. I'm going to have to stop that. At least I'm still here. So we'll take that off HAPS like that. And I'll just continue reading a little bit to you, and then I'll have to close that window. So Scalia was wrong. 2 new databases of English writing from the founding era confirm that bear arms is a military term. Non-military uses of bear arms are not just rare, they're almost non-existent. So a search of Brigham Young University's new online corpus of founding era American English with more than 95,000 texts and 138 million words yields 281 instances of the phrase bear arms. Brigham Young University's corpus of early modern English with 40,000 texts and close to 1.3 billion words shows 1,572 instances of the phrase. Subtracting about 350 duplicate matches, that leaves about 1,500 separate occurrences of bear arms in the 17th and 18th centuries, and only a handful don't refer to war, soldiering, or organized armed action. These databases confirm that the natural meaning of bear arms in the framers' day was military. But we shouldn't need big data to tell us this. Bear arms has never worked comfortably with the language of personal defense, hunting, or target practice. Writing about the Second Amendment in 1995, a historian called Gary Wills put it succinctly: one does not bear arms against a rabbit. Yes. So that's just a small diversion that I wanted to make about the bigger picture of Americans being bullied by a minority number of people. I should have written it down because I came across a very pertinent quote about the difference in pure number terms about how many Americans are represented by senators who are Democratic. Millions less, the much smaller number of Americans who are represented by Republican senators, which nevertheless, thanks to the filibuster bill, manages to exert minority control over the US government. And only an end to the filibuster rule will change that, because otherwise you have to get 60 votes to pass legislation. And Democrats propose lots of legislation to improve the lives of everyday Americans. Republicans pretty much only introduce legislation to introduce tax cuts for the wealthy and incentives for the wealthy to own personal airplanes. And what else do they introduce legislation for? They introduce legislation to end previously introduced democratic legislation that helped give millions of people access to healthcare, such as the Affordable Care Act, which disproportionately helped poor people in red states who couldn't get access to medical care, but was nevertheless most violently opposed by governors and voters in red states who were sold the bad message that the ACA was undesirable because it was part of big government overstepping. And the real message of all of that opposition to big government is don't help Black people, don't help Hispanic people, don't help migrants, don't interfere with our emotions that we are naturally more entitled, because as white people, we created this country and we built everything in it, this grandiose, delusional, hopped up idea that only white people have any legitimacy as American citizens. And so any efforts to remedy disadvantage or end oppression or persecution of Black Americans or migrant Americans is somehow favoring them. And that entitlement is seen over and over again in the thinking of mass shooters who will say that they went to El Paso to start a race war because they believe it is exploiting white Americans to allow immigrants to move to America. Or Dylan Roof? I think Dylan Roof, who shot up a church in North Carolina, possibly, and killed, I think, 9 Black Americans because, again, he wanted to start a race war because he thought America was being left vulnerable to Black people raping white people. And that white overreaction to any threat, that white overcalculation of risk to cost benefits, that idea that it's worth going to jail, it's worth becoming a murderer because the threat to the purity of white women is so under threat. That inflamed, irrational, murderous, racist thinking, whilst very solidly present in the minds of evident murderers, is also present in the minds of lots of other people to a lesser degree. And the more people in power endorse and validate that racist rhetoric, the more killers you bring to fruition, as it were, the more psychologically damaged people you push over the cliff of sanity into actively murderous antisocial territory. And mental health advocates will say, don't equate insanity with murder, because there's a clarity to the thinking of many murderous people. It's just very antisocial. So maybe I should say sociopathic rather than off the cliff of insanity. I haven't seen any comments for a little while, so I don't know if there is a problem. I can see that Sylvia Stargal said, if you don't like what she's saying, you're always welcome to leave, which is true. This is a broadcast that is optional. All right, so I'm going to close that Washington Post article, which was probably interfering with the viability of the broadcast. And then I'm going to go play it with my daughter shortly, but in the meantime, I'm going to show you a very cute picture of a man having his hand held as he's vaccinated by his friend. So he's wearing a 2-pack shirt. He has a fear of needles. I think he's a basketballer. Let's have a look. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and it's posted by something called Complex Sports. So I don't know. So Lou Dort, if anybody knows who these players are, please tell me, but I think that's gorgeous and a good example of male-to-male help through moments of vulnerability. That's what's the opposite of toxic? That is laudable masculinity. That is best practice masculinity. I'll think of a term, it'll come to me, but your suggestions are also welcome. I can also see now in the sidebar of Twitter that there's a problem with fatbergs. America's wipe obsession is tearing up sewer systems. Oh, that's going to be a big problem. We should have anticipated that happening during a pandemic because, of course, people use more wipes. And there's a lot of wipes that are falsely marketed as being flushable, and they're not flushable. They don't dissolve in sanitary systems. They just accumulate with fat flushed through kitchen systems and poo flushed through toilet systems, septic systems. And they create blockages that then block up the passage of sewage and create what's called fatbergs, like these big blocking dangerous icebergs, but they're not in an ocean, they're in a sewage system, and the blockages obviously can result in sewage backing up and overflowing into people's houses, and they're having to be very expensive public infrastructure movements of having to dig down, and people dress up in, I don't know, hazmat suits and go down into the sewers and try and unblock the sewers manually or with equipment to just dig out massive hundreds of kilogram deposits of wet wipes that have clumped together with shit and kitchen fat and just grease and everything you can think of, and sticks and leaves, into huge balls that just tear up sewage systems. And that's a big problem. So my goal in coalition building is also to always get us more comfortable with talking about uncomfortable, unpleasant things. To me, the former guy, namely Trump, is notable for subscribing to a certain kind of toxic positivity endorsed by the Power of Positive Thinking author Norman Vincent Peale, who said, you know, if you talk positively about something, you're more likely to make it happen. which has an important kernel of truth to it. Yes, a confident attitude and self-esteem can be valuable contributors to the chances of success of any given project. But at the same time, and a lot of Americans will know this as well, it's a dangerous sign of a confidence trickster, someone who capitalizes on human tendency to believe in people who seem confident. So Trump seemed confident and described himself as a cheerleader for America. He brought death. He brought death wrapped up in positivity. So I know it's a famous comment to say when fascism comes to America, it will come wrapped in the flag and carrying a Bible. But there should be an extension to that quote, which also says it will come wrapped in positivity ideology. So people on the right who tell themselves that they're just resisting the depressiveness of the left, which wants to spend a lot of energy calling people out and criticizing people and decrying industrialization and capitalism. And their claim is that they are the bulwark of emotional stability and ability to move forwards and be positive and work with reality rather than having to curl up into a little ball and cry about it. That's how they would encapsulate the difference between the left and the right. And when you look at their repeated criticisms of the left, they'll always say that we are emotionally dysfunctional and can't get anything done. And the reason why we have Biden in power is because some more people got to see how the toxic positivity of the right enabled very broad destruction, very broad death and emotional and economic contraction, economic hardship, and consequent practical suffering for millions of Americans because of that toxic commitment to just making up a story and selling it to people with nothing but confidence and chutzpah driving you. So Trump went to the American people and was like, and told a few contradictory stories, that the virus was a hysterical whip-up, and then that he himself was the captain of America during a war against the virus, that it was the invisible enemy. The thread of all of it was anti-leftism and racist violence towards any population that was convenient to him. So initially when Trump pretended the virus wasn't serious, he was saying the media is the enemy, making you fear something. And the only thing we have to fear is fear. What, darling?
Did you wash Bunny yet?
Yeah, Bunny's in the wash. That's why I put the washing on. So that washing cycle will be over soon, and then we'll take Bunny out and hang him on the line. Bunny has to dry. You can see. Craig is here and says, hello, Dav. Thank you. And Rabbi Giorgito, is it finished now? Then you can turn the dial around to 0 and you might have finished. The cycle might have finished. Oh, well, you don't have to turn it off. You can still open the door without it being turned off. You just open the door. You squeeze the handle and open it up. I might have to go and hang Bunny on the line for a second. But when the rabbi, if you are a real rabbi, which I entertain some doubts, I'm just going to hang Bunny. That's okay. I'm going to open the door. I'll be back in just a sec. Okay. All right. Oh my gosh, so adorable. She's talking to Bunny now because he's hanging up on the line to dry. And so she's just, I guess, going to have a conversation with him while he's up there. So adorable. Ew. I don't know if you saying I want to bless you, my sister, is a very credible way to assert your qualifications as a rabbi. That would be a very creepy thing for a rabbi to say without any invitation to do so and without consent. Yeah, no, I'm going to mute you, Pumpkin. May the authorities have their own personal plague. You're a bit weird, and I'm just going to try and exclude you from the conversation as much as I can at the moment. All right. We've muted the distracting rabbi person. Oop. All right. Now, where were we? Bunny, the pretend rabbi who really derailed the conversation. Were we talking about the vaccine? I don't know. If anybody remembers what I was talking about before we had a bunny issue, come back to me. Matt Gaetz says he's a victim of criminal extortion because the New York Times has reported that he's under investigation for possible child sex trafficking. We'll listen to a little clip soon of Matt Gaetz going on Tucker Carlson and pointing out that Tucker Carlson himself was accused of a sex crime. And he says, so you understand, you've been accused of a very inappropriate crime yourself. You'll know how upsetting and distressing it is. And Tucker Carlson did not appear to enjoy that interview and described it after the fact as having been one of the weirdest interviews he's ever done. So first, though, I'll play a little bit of an interview with Roger Stone and Alex Jones. Alex Jones, who says they want to put me in jail, and the idea that we did that capital thing is just ridiculous. This is frigging ridiculous, but who knows? I mean, Roger has been right all along. We'll probably go to prison for it for all I know. So satisfying that they are having to contend with the fact that they've gotten away with so much impunity for so long and they've avoided the law. I mean, Trump could pardon people, and Trump can no longer pardon people for federal offenses. So that's very satisfying, and it's to be hoped that their reign of terror is over. We look forward to that by anticipating that they be charged and go to jail. Hasn't happened yet, but the fact that they're worried about it and talking about it in an effort to reassure themselves and their listeners, that's very promising. Of course, the Capitol Hill was a crime, and the instigators of that crime, the attempted overthrow of the United States government, they should be held accountable for that. It was very humiliating for America on an international stage, and very disrespectful to the rule of law and to American governance and to the system of American democracy, to say nothing of the individuals themselves who were harmed, the 140 officers who were injured on the day, the one officer who lost his life after being sprayed in the face with bear mace, which has been captured on video and is available on a Washington Post article for anybody to see. Let's listen to this 20-second clip. Okay.
It's great to be with you.
Appreciate you, buddy. Yeah, they really want to capture him, like capture the flag. They want to put him in jail. They want to put me in jail. And it's the idea that we did that Capitol thing is just ridiculous. I think that is freaking ridiculous. But who knows? I mean, Roger's been right all along. We'll probably go to prison for it, for all I know.
It's great to be with you.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Okay.
Yeah, they really want to capture him, like capture the flag. They want to put him in jail. They want to put me in jail. And it's the idea that we did that Capitol thing is just ridiculous. I think that is freaking ridiculous. But who knows? I mean, Roger's been right all along. We'll probably go to prison for it, for all I know.
That's so exciting. We'll probably go to prison for it, for all I know. I'm really happy to see them contemplate that. And it gives me hope that it will eventuate, because Alex Jones was definitely in DC on the 5th of January, and he's definitely been a big force pushing right-wing disinformation on the public, and not just the American public, but the international public. So they've been causing dysfunction and social turbulence all around the world. So Shauna says, hopefully, yes. Fingers crossed. But in the meantime, the really promising things that are happening are that Biden is doing so much for the American people, and it is now projected that they will be able to vaccinate 200 million people, or 200 million doses administered within the first 100 days of Biden's administration. I'm now seeing a comment from Darnella Frazier. So we're going to bring up George Floyd's death. George Floyd his murder is the subject of a trial that began, I would say, yesterday, and the witnesses were called. You think Bunny's already all done? Oh, very good. Could you close that door down? Thank you, sweetheart, because that will let in too much water. Perfect. He's dry already. I can't believe it. So fast. Darnella Fraser is the 17-year-old girl who filmed the death of George Floyd. And she said, there are nights I have stayed up apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life. But it's like not what I should have done. It's not what I should have done. It's what he should have done. So she's referencing Derek Chauvin, who's on trial for second-degree murder. He was initially on trial for third-degree, or he was initially charged with third-degree murder, but it was upgraded. Third-degree murder. And I will, for this, so first-degree murder is premeditated, second-degree is not. They're both intentional, though, and third-degree is manslaughter. Oh, well, that's excellent. So second-degree murder, he's being tried for the intentionality of murdering George Floyd. And the evidence to support that is the way Officer Chauvin threatened to mace an EMT who was offering to check his pulse. All of the people who were there saying, you're killing him, he can't breathe. Yes. It's I've got a little troll. No, George Floyd did not hold a pregnant woman at gunpoint. When you say Google that, you're promoting lies because they've conflated George Floyd's record with somebody else's. He didn't hold a pregnant woman at gunpoint. All of that would be academic. There is no way the rule of law allows for people to be executed on the street by virtue of being tortured to death with a knee on your neck and somebody else on your torso. So am I able to block the user? The buckets of evidence with relation to George Floyd are that there is a video recording of, wow, many people care about George Floyd. I'm just having to mute a whole bunch of comments, and you might not be able to see it. But anyway, a criminal record of any description is completely irrelevant to whether or not it's legal for a police officer to murder someone in full sight of everybody else. So many people are left with psychological trauma as a consequence of having witnessed a murder. Many people were distressed. A 9-year-old witness who testified said she was upset and angry watching what was happening. A white firefighter was there and was just cross-examined by the defense attorney, who said, did you or did you not call Officer Chauvin a bitch? And she was like, yes, I did. At that point, George Floyd had been taken away in an ambulance and was clearly already dead. It is quite upsetting to watch somebody be killed in front of you. At which point the jury was taken out of the room because the judge told her off for arguing with the defense attorney. Although I think a lot of people will be glad that she made that point, and the jury were able to hear that point she made, that it is distressing to watch somebody be killed in front of your eyes and to be helpless, to not be able to stop that unfolding murder happening in front of you. So it was murder. There was an element of intentionality because they told the police officers who were persecuting Floyd and torturing him to death that he was unlikely to survive this. They said, can we check his pulse? He cannot breathe. George Floyd was saying, I can't breathe. He said it 16 times. He called out for his mother twice. The medical professionals commenting on Twitter have said, bringing to the table their medical experience, they can hear the stridor in his voice as he begs for his life, as he tells them he can't breathe. So a good opportunity for more and more people to know that even if you have enough air passage to get out the phrase, I can't breathe, that doesn't mean you have adequate access to air or that your oxygen levels will be adequate to replenish your brain with what it needs to keep you alive. George Floyd died of a heart attack consequent to deprivation of oxygen. His body shut down and he died before he was ever lifted onto a plank to have him put in the ambulance. Nurses have noticed that, when you die, you begin to leak because your body systems that were closed up, your sphincters, are no longer contracted for any reason because your brain is no longer controlling the operation of your muscles anymore. So you begin to leak fluids and substances the minute you pass from the world. And so it's been noted that happened to George Floyd before he was ever even lifted onto a gurney to be placed in an ambulance. So even after he became limp and unresponsive, there was 2 additional minutes of the officer kneeling on Floyd's neck with people saying he needs medical attention, he's unresponsive now. And it's been noted as well in the evidence from witnesses that the paramedics attending from the ambulance had to ask Officer Chauvin to stop kneeling on George Floyd. So we have 23 new comments, which presumably means the troll person has said a lot of things. Nice. I'm just not even reading them. I'm just reading all of her comments. There's a lot of documentation. Researchers have found that in each individual county across the United States, police unions have been formed in each of these counties at different periods of time, and that with every formation of a police union, there has been a commensurate rise, not a commensurate, there has been a consequent rise in the number of extrajudicial deaths. Again, asserting that someone was a criminal, having the rule of law means people who are accused of crimes or people with criminal records are not executed on the road by officers kneeling. So that is not how public executions occur, even when there is a death penalty. So your username is Rebecca Masterson, but I absolutely struggle to believe that you're a woman. You're just a very tiresome person seeking to... I don't think people can see your comments, so it probably looks like I'm having such a strong reaction to an invisible problem, but there is a very profuse troll trying to attract this broadcast right now. Oh, you can see them? Yes, it is super annoying, and I apologize. You know, somebody was not executed on the road because executed would imply legal endorsement, but somebody was murdered on the road, and that person was George Floyd. Hello, Donna. How are you feeling? You go turn off the TV? Have you finished writing The Adventures of Supermom? Can I show the people? Can I read them your story? No? Because I thought it was pretty special. Can I just tell them that my daughter wrote a story called Supermom, in which Supermom, what did she do? She defeated the aliens. And
Okay, I can just tell the story.
Okay, you can tell the story. You want to come
I
here?
need the box.
All right.
You can look like this. Okay. Supermom was napping when suddenly an asteroid hit Earth. It was about to hit Earth. Supermom's alarm clock woke her up. She swooped to where the asteroid was about to hit and destroyed it. And the asteroid bits which were broken turned into stardust.
Whoa.
The next day,
Yeah.
while Supermom was napping, aliens attacked because the asteroid they sent to Earth was their asteroid they sent to Earth.
Oh, no.
They were attacking. Luckily, Supermom defeated the alien with her secret weapon.
Yeah.
Not telling you what the weapon is.
What is the weapon?
Not telling you.
Oh, it's so secret.
Mhm.
Wow.
The next day, a portal opened, unleashing lots of monsters. And I'm not talking about lots. I'm talking lots. I'm talking about vampires, Frankenstein, ghosts, all kinds of different monsters.
Wow.
Luckily, Superman was there, and she was able to close the portal and defeat the monsters.
Wow.
The end.
Wow. She was able to defeat the monsters and close the portal.
So no monsters would get out. Or if she didn't close the portal, then all then all of Earth would be destroyed. So would Supermom.
Yeah.
If we didn't close the portal. And then the monsters would keep unleashing and unleashing.
People unleashing?
Yep, they'd keep going.
Yeah, so it was lucky they were stopped. Does Supermom have a sidekick?
Nope.
Yeah. Oh, look, I'm going to share a comment on screen. Somebody said about Matt Gaetz. Not Matt Gaetz, sorry. Somebody said about Supermom that her superpower was knowledge. Can you see that where it says knowledge?
Thank you.
Was her superpower. Well,
Thank
you saw
you.
that somebody said she's beautiful. Yes.
No, I mean.
Yeah, I know. She said she was beautiful, and then I muted her.
I mean.
I know.
That one.
Yeah.
No, one person said great story.
Oh, one person said great story. I'm so proud. You are a good reader. Yes, Craig, you are lucky that you cannot see the troll. I'm just muting all the troll comments as fast as I can, but some of them.
And you'll never know what Superman's secret weapon is. Never. I'll never tell you.
Yeah. Secret. Well, that was an excellent story.
It's a secret because if anyone knew about it, they would go cray and they would snatch it from Superman's hand and go crazy and maybe destroy the Earth.
Maybe destroy the Earth. Wow.
If they ever knew about Superman's secret weapon.
Oh, so you have to keep it secret even from the audience to protect the Earth.
Yeah, because it's super cool.
It's super cool?
Yeah.
Secret. Well, thank you so much for that beautiful story. And did you need my help to stick the piece of paper together?
Nope.
Could you get Mummy a drink of water? Could you do that, Dana? No. Monkey. Craig says, what does he say about your daughter? He says, your daughter is darling. Dav, because they call me Dav. Is that nice?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, now Mummy's going back to talking about somebody called George Floyd. And I'm going to read a quote from the 17-year-old girl who filmed it. She said, when I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad, I look at my brothers, I look at my cousins and my uncles because they are all black. I have black friends and I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. So everybody wants to hug that lady because she was so brave and it's traumatic. Somebody says, I live in the Twin Cities. Days after the event, Darnella explained that she had seen so many similar things at that corner that she was fed up and wanted for once to record it. So that was apparently not a novel occurrence from Minneapolis police. And the Minneapolis police have long been accused of racism. And the city's police department has received many excessive something. Let's look up what excessive refers to here. Many excessive force complaints. Okay. So that was published from the New York Times, which is why I can't access it right now because I don't have a New York Times subscription anymore. It was a oh, wow, that's pretty funny though. The bad person said, yeah, actually, we don't need to worry about that. Why don't I teach her self-defense? Is that a good point, darling? Should Mummy teach you self-defense? How do you get people who might be attacking you? I think the real trick is to just run away as fast as you can and to scream for help as loudly as you can. That's always the idea if somebody's attacking you a little bit. But if it's just somebody at school and they're just bothering you a little bit, then what do? We just go play somewhere else. And if they keep doing it, what do we do then?
Say stop.
We say stop and then...
Or we should say stop thing too. It's where people stop.
Yeah.
They think what to do.
Yeah.
They think, okay, this person said they're annoyed. They say stop, I'll stop. And then do it.
Okay.
And stop.
And I think sometimes naming what they're doing can help too. So like if you use a doing word, so you say stop tickling me, or you say stop pinching me, or stop biting me, so that the teachers can hear what exactly that it is you say they're doing. so that, and then they might feel embarrassed as well, and that might make them stop. When you really expose what they're doing, if they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing, I mean, if it's just tickling, then maybe the teacher will be like, oh, I'll let them sort it out themselves. If you just say, stop tickling me. But if you said, stop biting me, the teacher would think, uh-oh, biting's really terrible. And if they heard that, they would rush over and say, hey, no biting. Biting's really not allowed, is it?
And also, there's also stop, feel, go. Stop, feel,
Stop,
go.
feel, go?
Yeah. Stop, feel, go.
So somebody wrote on Twitter that they signed up for bystander intervention training, but then couldn't make it. So they just went on the site and they saw that more trainings are scheduled in the future if people are interested. So it's called Hollaback, Free Bystander Intervention Training, and it's training to stop anti-Asian American and xenophobic harassment. For realsies? You want another sandwich? What would you like? Why don't you wash up all the strawberries first? Or fairy bread? What are you munching? You're just taking advantage. Maybe we'll see how long Mummy's been talking for. Maybe Mummy should just go. Marsha says, I believe we need to teach our daughters martial arts from a young age. They unfortunately need these skills. And yeah, that's cool. We could do, what kind of martial arts could we do? We could do...
Hold on, Mommy.
Oh, somebody just said moderators are overrated.
Mommy, go down.
That one says, have you taught her about modern slavery in the Middle East and South America? Oh, modern slavery is not limited.
He hasn't.
It's true, I haven't. Modern slavery is not limited to the Middle East and South America model. Modern slavery occurs everywhere, including in America. Somebody says, good job, God bless you and your daughter. Is that why you were saying thank you, or are you saying thank you to the person who says she's adorable?
Thank you too.
Yeah. And Rebecca is still arguing that having someone like George Floyd be murdered on the street is of no consequence. I assure you, you are wrong. Female human rights violations in the Middle East is something that person's still kind of shrieking about. They're up to 3 question marks now. Yep, lots of troll comments. Oh, this person says, I'd be embarrassed. They wouldn't like it if their mummy talked to Americans about politics. But are you proud of your mummy doing broadcasts and helping Americans vote out Donald Trump and then helping them vote out all the rest of the Donald Trump type people in America? What do you think about it, baby? What's your opinion? Yeah, that's it. Well, she doesn't have an opinion right now, but I assure you my children have been very kind and very supportive. They sometimes get a bit jealous when mummy's talking to people who aren't them, but that's the same with all working mummies who work from home. And this mummy broadcasts in a corridor with no office door for me to close, which in a way is good. It means you can come to me when you need anything. But yes.
How do you know if this is a card to you? Because this says you're always in my thought. Happy New Year. That's all.
It was sent to me. That's how I know it was from me.
Oh.
And 2 autopsies of George Floyd found that his death was a homicide. So if you're not familiar with the term homicide, that means murder. And whilst their toxicology reports may have said that there were drugs in his system, there are police training manuals that say you have to take additional care of people's respiratory integrity if you suspect them of drug use. And we know they suspected George Floyd of drug use because they said to onlookers who were urging police officers not to kill George Floyd, they said, stop killing him. And the one police officer who was acting as a lookout to stop bystanders from intervening told people, don't do drugs, kids. This is what happens. So they understood he had potentially used drugs. It does make you more vulnerable to respiratory compromise. But I assure you, anybody who is handcuffed face down with somebody kneeling on your neck for 9 minutes and somebody putting pressure on your torso and legs as well.
Mommy, stop talking about that. Remember that made me almost cry.
Yeah, it was sad, wasn't it? Oh, Marsha says she doesn't really see me as not an American, but rather as someone speaking globally. So Mummy's talking about the rise of fascism all over the world. Yeah, no, I acknowledge that George Floyd had a criminal record, and I've explained multiple times that regardless of whether or not someone had a criminal record, it's completely counter the rule of law to have public executions on the street. So that's why it was not anything to do with his criminal record that he was murdered. He was just murdered because some police officers don't respect the rule of law and have so much malice in their hearts towards people of color that they would feel that society would allow them to get away with it, even when they were being videotaped, even when they were being confronted by multiple members of the public. That's such a confidence level, not only in their own malice, but in the malice of the American public in general. And so your comments are proof of the high level of malice and anti-Black sentiment in your own heart that you continue to make very, very weak and irrelevant points. Points that show your lack of respect for the rule of law and for how the American Constitution guarantees equal protection under the law. Although it can't guarantee it, it specifies it. And you're very repetitive about the Middle East. We're discussing America. So you're free to have your own broadcast to discuss the Middle East, but please stop bringing up irrelevancies to this program. I guess we could accede to your request and say, there are no doubt injustices in the Middle East. There are no doubt injustices all over the world. You diminish our ability to address any injustice by interrupting a broadcast about one particular injustice by A, lying about whether or not it is an injustice, and B, trying to distract from a conversation by bringing up another nation when our focus is on America, and our focus is on one specific trial of a police officer who has been charged with second-degree murder for the very evidence-based case of George Floyd's death. I think we're nearly done with this broadcast for today, Pumpkin Pie. It is irrelevant to the topic. This person is an all-caps little troll. What a troll. We shouldn't give them too much attention and feedback, because that means they'll just be reinforced for doing it and they'll come back again. When you give people dopamine shots, then you are creating a reward cycle loop. They're very hysterical and upset, and I would say that indicates they're in a lot of emotional pain from the cognitive dissonance of having American racism put in sharp international focus because of the death of George Floyd, and how public it was and how extraordinary it was, because unjust deaths occur all the time, extrajudicial murders occur all the time, and they are, whilst strictly speaking in numbers, more white people are murdered by police officers than Black people. That's because Black Americans constitute only 13% of the American population. In purely proportional terms, if you're Black, your taxpayer funds that you contribute to the paying of police officer salaries is unjustly turned against you when officers target you for brutalization, and you do not receive equal protection under the law. That's a phrase that should be in much more use. American Black Lives Matter activists are asking for equal protection under the law and an end to unequal targeting for violence and death. Percy says, love your broadcast, always informative. Is that nice, baby? Yes, so the pain experienced by somebody who doesn't enjoy it when the international news focuses on, oh, thank you. We have somebody who helped us, and they tried to block the bad person who was trolling our conversation. But yeah, it is very painful for people whose worldviews are very racist, who are very dismissive of the equal rights that should be enjoyed by people who are Black, when there is so much malice in their heart that they continue to claim that property damage is a bigger problem than the murder of people whose only crime was having a skin color that activated the prejudices of arresting officers. Yes, America has racism, and yet I wish to move to America. Extraordinary, isn't it? Australia, where I'm from, has a lot of racism as well. It's unlikely that anywhere in the world is free from racism. Nevertheless, we are free to discuss prejudices and biases and racism, and how that ultimately is disadvantageous to all of us, although obviously initially and most consequentially for the people who are the targets of hate. And people who get hysterical about Black Lives Matter movements, so civil rights movements, it's not new to history. There was the same type of hysteria generated when Martin Luther King was advocating for basic civil rights for Black Americans as well. Yes, not to applaud property damage, but significant amounts of property damage were caused by accelerationist white supremacist movements, such as the Boogaloo movement, and also other white supremacists who took advantage of the Black Lives Matter protests to burn and destroy property and kill police officers, and have been charged. So a large number of the people charged for violence and murder during the Black Lives Matter protests have been white people. So yes, lots of Black Lives Matter protests were abused as cover story. Are you ready for me to get off? Yeah, I think that's fair. Yes, deaths caused by people who were white and who I'm describing as accelerationists because it's their goal to kick off a wow, look at this. Look at this. Whoops, baby. Careful. You sound like a little monster. Yes, accelerationists who sought to murder people to advance what they saw as a necessary race war that they just wanted to hasten. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. I maybe can go on YouTube and just block that person, and then they won't come back next time. And just do a little all caps psychological meltdown in the same way. Indeed, I'm sure we can all get behind a sentiment that says anybody who supports terrorism, shame on you, and we can acknowledge that a message that's been confirmed by the Department of Homeland Security, that a high proportion of threats facing the American people is domestic terror threats from people who belong to white supremacist organizations. So if I could, I would put the Rebecca Troll account on a watch list for her psychological problems. And we will... You are being pretty cheeky. Maybe I will have to maybe put Bunny on the lost shelf for a bit. What I'm going to do is ask you to take Bunny to the living room and play with her for 5 minutes until I come. You can put on a timer if you like. I want to be able to say goodbye and say some concluding remarks. I did promise I'll come with you soon. Well, actually, did I promise that? But I will. I will because you deserve it. Yeah. Soon I'm going to do concluding remarks and say goodbye. But if you don't go to the living room now, Baba, Mummy's going to have to confiscate Bunny and put her on the lost shelf for 5 minutes, which I don't want to do. Okay. Rest, BLM, white supremacists. Receipts are sometimes a good way. Okay, Richmond riots instigated by white supremacists. Okay, so we'll bring that up on the screen because that will help. Receipts are a good way to at least show the audience that there are more ways to stand up against white supremacist trolls than purely by deriding them or contradicting them. You just bring receipts. So this is a comment from police published on July the 27th in 2020 of last year. I'll have to bring it up bigger than that so you can see the whole article. Richmond riots instigated by white supremacists disguised as Black Lives Matter, according to law enforcement officials. So that was Richmond, and Richmond is in Virginia, and that was a pattern that's been repeated. So I can find additional I can find additional resources that show that more. So the Department of Homeland Security has ID'd white supremacists, not Black Lives Matter or Antifa, as the greatest threat. For some people, it really will feel very difficult to believe that, but it's because they've been very groomed, you could say, very conditioned by a very powerful right-wing media bubble. And that's important, to not get distracted, to be able to discuss an important point. So we'll just quickly have a look at this, which is another article pointing out that the Department of Homeland Security has ID'd white supremacists, not Black Lives Matter or Antifa, as the greatest threat. So you've probably heard a lot about Antifa, Marxists and anarchists, blah, blah, blah. We were warned that the goal of that movement is to undermine the United States, but white supremacists are actually concerning the Department of Homeland Security and a lot more. These are white people who prosecutors say are members of an anti-government extremist group, and they've been charged with federal terrorism accounts. They are the most persistent and lethal threat, according to draft documents made public from DHS. They are listed above the immediate danger from foreign terrorist groups. All right. Race war and violent overthrow. The two men claim allegiance to the Boogaloo Boys, which a press release from the US attorney said is a group that advocates for the violent overthrow of the government. The Boogaloo Boys hope to achieve their ends by fomenting a race war. A race war was also the goal of Dylan Roof, a young white man who in 2015 shot to death 9 Black people during a Bible study in Charleston, South Carolina. The white supremacist movement attracted DHS's notice because of the violence that often accompanies their ideologies. From 1994 to May of 2020, white supremacists and far-right extremists killed 329 people in attacks, dwarfing figures from groups with other ideologies. The database maintained by the University of Maryland recorded 900 politically or ideologically motivated attacks in that time period, and the database includes 21 people killed in left-wing attacks, oopsies, and 1 Antifa activist implicated in a death, but the Antifa activist was the person killed. In June of 2020, federal law officers charged Air Force Sergeant Stephen Carrillo, who's 32, and another man, both alleged Boogaloo Boys, with killing a federal security officer in Oakland. Carrillo also faces state charges in the killing of a sheriff's deputy. So it's a good article to highlight the problem with white supremacist lawlessness, and consequently lawlessness from people who are linked to white nationalist movements. So I do so apologize for having had my account taken over by a troll. I hope everybody in the comment section is able to just rise above and ignore it. Remember, that's a skill set that we have to work on. The ability to ignore trolls when we can't do anything about them. We could mute them, but it takes some time and energy. I hope you are comfortable with the way that I will work in my post-broadcast time to find a way to stop that person from doing something similar in a subsequent broadcast. So let's see if we can go back to my bookmarks. So who wants to know where you can get that free bystander intervention training from? Because I can read out the address of it. It's ihollaback.org. So IHOLLABACK and then .org. And I'll put it up on the screen. I will note in George Floyd's case that the argument from the defense has been 2 things so far: that the crowd made me murder the victim because the crowd objected. vociferously when I was murdering the victim. And the second theme of the defense argument, has been, I didn't murder the victim because he was going to die at that exact moment from other causes. My knee on his neck had nothing to do with it. So that's the defense. It's probably quite distressing for people to watch. I haven't been watching it. I've just been reading the commentary, but just be gentle to yourselves and others if the weeks of this trial are hard to cope with, hard to hear the defense arguments, and focus on what you can do positively in terms of really being there for each other and trying to rise above the things that would emotionally bring you down. So I'm trying to model the ability to ignore trolls and negative things. We all have to be able to be strong for each other and make it more ephemeral. So it's important to be able to call out wrongdoing and condemn it. But if you've condemned it and you've done everything within your immediate power to stop it, either you accept you've reached the limit of what you can do, or you try and do more. So let's see. Oh, there's one thing I might be able to do right now, which is I can edit what I'm sharing this with.